So good evening all. This is number 2 of the double header today. So if you've just joined us after meeting Dan Miller, thanks very much. And I hope you enjoyed seeing Dan. I can't believe he's only 21 years old and he runs a multi-million pound business and won Entrepreneur of the Year. And he's doing such amazing things with all of those kids. It's just incredible. Just a few guidelines for today's session. We're going to keep it nice and short, just 25 minutes or so. And if there's any questions that you want to put in there, put them in the chat box, please. And Stu will try and curate those and feed those in at relevant times. If there's things we don't get through at the end of the meeting, I'll ask Julian if he wouldn't mind putting a bit of pen to paper to answer a few of those. If you don't mind muting yourself while we're in the session, that would be really nice. And that would just stop us hearing you cooking your tea. At the end of this, obviously, I'm hoping Julian will give you a nice big plug for everything that he does. And so I'll make a start. It's my very great pleasure to welcome an absolutely sensational, I say young man because he feels like a young man to me, young man to today's Vox 2. And it is Julian Hepple. He's twice Grammy nominated for working with people like One Direction, Andrew Lloyd Webber. Of course, he did a lot of work with Prince. He's now head of AV and music technology down at the Guildhall School of Music. He runs half marathons in his spare time. He's an amazing chef. And to be honest, Julian and myself and Stu, we shared some of the most outrageous memories of all time on our tour to Los Angeles back in 2005, of which unfortunately I can't divulge because
we're not past the watershed.
We're not past the watershed. But we had such an amazing time, and ever since then, Julian's just been one of the best guys that I know in the country. So, Julian, welcome to the session.
Thank you very much. That's very kind. I used to be able to run half marathons. I think I can barely run a bath now, but I do my very best. So, yeah. So I'm Jules. Like John said, I've been lucky enough to be nominated for a Grammy a couple of times. I work as a music producer a lot. I used to be a trombone owner, which is how I first kind of got involved with John. But my first musical experiences were about the age of 9 or 10, and I was a tea boy at a pop studio in Sheffield called Steelworks. So I used to make the tea for your S Club 7s and the Spice Girls, and then when I was kind of 13 and 14, would become tasked with trying to make them sound like they were singing in tune. So I kind of got my technology chops together that way, but also whilst kind of doing my very best with a trombone. I had an amazing music teacher who's one of the finest jazz musicians in the country, a guy called Dennis Rollins, really inspiring trombone player, and was into kind of studios and tech. So I used to kind of hang out with him, and he'd help me, and he helped me get into Trinity College of Music. So when I was 18, off I went to Trinity College of Music, studying jazz trombone, and I got there, and on day one realised that I'd got a lot of work to do because the standard, turns out everyone else was doing 6 hours a day and I was kind of vibing it. So I got a bit of a wake-up call there about kind of the importance of putting the hours in. So whilst I was at Trinity, a lot of my focus was sound engineering. So I picked up my first couple of gigs. So I started working for a saxophone player at the time called Soweto Kinch, and a guy called Dennis Baptiste, and June Records and Jazz Jamaica. So I was working for those guys, still playing my trombone, still at music college, trying to soak up all that information, but if I'm totally honest, wasn't putting my 6 hours a day in that I needed to put in the horn in order to kind of keep up with my colleagues and really make that commitment to playing. So because of that, at the end of my third year, I failed spectacularly. And the thing I've noticed throughout my whole career has that been all the growth always comes from moments of failure. And I think getting better at failure and learning how to see it as a positive kind of move is a really useful skill and kind of path to go down. So I failed my third year, and then so I took an extra year. So the 4-year course, I took an extra year, and I switched from jazz performance to composition and arranging. And this is where I really kind of felt I landed into my niche because I could use my kind of technical skills I'd got with kind of arranging skills. If anyone's into kind of audio production, arranging and mixing are basically the same bits of your brain. It's just sometimes you're using notes on a page, sometimes you're using faders and mixing. So it's a similar kind of headspace. And I just threw myself into it. I realized I'd spent 3 years kind of gliding and just kind of living the life of Riley, trying to have as much fun as possible, but wasn't really developing musically. So I kind of have a word with myself and really started to put the hours in, and found a work ethic that really leads me to believe that kind of the hard work is its own reward, and did pretty well. So I left Trinity, and in my final recital, I did a crazy thing where I put kind of 500 trees and 80 speakers in a big concert hall and did a big walkthrough thing with 70 musicians and a big band tied in at one end. And it was kind of mad and cool, but it was pretty good. So I graduated Trinity and got a couple of awards, managed to get 98% for my final there. So that was a nice turnaround from the 38% in jazz I'd got 2 years later, which had shown me that the hard work had paid off. And when I was doing my final recital, I called some guys from the South Bank Centre in London, from the Royal Festival Hall, come and watch this, and I'll put it on at the Royal Festival Hall. So they booked me for that gig to do this kind of big production thing. And then, so I thought, I'm going to throw the kitchen sink at this, and this is going to launch my career. So I got a bank loan so I could pay for bits of production, all sorts going on. And it was a categorical disaster, that performance, start to finish. Everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. It took me about 8 years to pay it off. I'd not thought from an audience perspective. I'd not been smart, basically. So it took me a while to kind of dust myself off and learn some lessons about where I'd gone wrong, and kind of acknowledge what had gone wrong and use it as a point to grow. I think there's a cutaway with that with your music practice as well. My favorite musicians and the people I enjoy working with practice what they're not good at. And I think that's a really useful skill to have, is to, not just practice the stuff you can do, see how you can develop the stuff you can't, and then you'll kind of grow a bit quicker. So yeah, I then was using a policy which I'd been, or mantra, which I think I've always used, which is always try and be the worst player in the band, if you can be. And that usually works pretty well for your own development. And also I was trying to figure out who was doing the kind of work and the kind of gigs that I'd want to be doing for my career. I met a guy called Matt Robertson, who's Bjork's producer. And a tactic I'd been told was find the 10 people doing the gigs you want to do, buy them lunch, chat them up essentially, and who knows what can come of it. So I started working for Matt, which meant working for Bjork. So in about 2013, I was doing a lot of arrangements for Bjork's live shows and helping putting bits and bobs together for Bjork shows. Off the back of that, I got the Westlife gig, which was a bit of a curveball. So I toured China and the UK with Westlife, 3 shows a day, 64-minute shows in China, 3 shows a day, 2, 5, and 8. Went mad, absolutely mad. It was, very strange. Anyway, so I was working for Westlife. From that, it's the same production company, so I picked up One Direction as soon as they started out. So I did everything from kind of That's What Makes You Beautiful onwards with those guys. And I had a bit of a realization there that wasn't the best use of my skills, because whether a One Direction gig sounds good or not isn't really important to anyone. People are there for the experience, and quite often the screaming would be so loud. I could have done some lovely bits of effect work and got some nice kind of shapes together, and it didn't matter. So I kind of went, this is only going to go kind of in one direction. I'm just making pop stars louder. So let's try and think of another application for those users. So kind of put that out to the universe. And I got a gig with the Shankar family, so Indian music, so Anushka Shankar and Ravi Shankar. So I worked for Ravi for the last couple of years before he passed away. And then I started working with Anushka Shankar, who's an amazing sitar player. She's Nora Jones's sister. And we started doing her live shows and then slowly kind of producing her albums. So I've produced her kind of 5 last albums, 2 of which we got nominated for a Grammy and didn't win. It was another bit of failure, but always growth coming from it. The first time I was in the right mood for weeks. The second time I had a great time, kind of learned from that. But working with Anushka got me a job with Prince. So for a couple of months, I was Prince's personal sound engineer in 2014 for a bunch of shows we did in London. He did a tour where he started at the smallest venue we could think of, which was a singer called Leanne LaHavanas's mum's two down terraced house. And we went from there all the way up to the O2 with gigs just every day. So the idea was he'd just announce a gig on Twitter and then there'd be kind of pandemonium and people would go and watch a gig, which was really hard from a technical perspective because we only knew about the gigs a few hours beforehand as well. So the logistics and the infrastructure to kind of make a big show happen in a couple of hours was really challenging. And he was a stickler for detail on the highest level where you could not get away with anything. So there was a demand for quality that again really instilled, I think, a good work ethic and a good standard to be set of what this has to happen, make this happen kind of thing. So I was working for Prince, then that stopped. I needed a bit of time off after that because it was kind of 24 hours a day. It was very intense. And then I started working with an American producer I've been working with for 7 years now, and jazz pianist on Blue Note, a guy called Robert Glasper, who is my favorite musician on the planet. Rob is just, and one of the nicest human beings you'll ever meet. So I've been working with Rob. So I do all his touring whenever he's in Europe, and on a few records, that kind of thing, do a few projects for him. Hearn is one of the most giving musicians and open, generous people. And it shows in both his playing and just in the way he lives his life. I think in particular with jazz musicians, the really, really good ones sound like they are as people. Yeah. Where their personality really comes through on the instrument, whether you go in back in the day of the lineage or current musicians, you know the people who are a bit angry and fierce from the way they play, you know the people who are quite humorous from the way they play. I think that's a great craft when the art can kind of, your personality can come across in notes. It's quite amazing. From there, I got married a few years ago and realized I was kind of on the road 200 days a year. So I put another kind of call out to the universe. And for the last 2.5 years, I've been working at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, where I run the recording department and do a lot of kind of music tech stuff and music tech teaching, work a lot on the jazz department. Kind of point the difference between us and the other music colleges is our jazz department kind of looks at jazz, studio and world music. So we kind of want to give our young musicians skill set to work in recording studios and to be able to contribute to other artists, that kind of thing. So we're not just a kind of, we'll make you play remarkably in this jazz idiom. We're trying to sculpt what we call kind of portfolio musicians. So that was, that's kind of my brief, what I've done so far. In terms of the things I've learned, which I think is a lot more useful than people just going on a kind of self-fulfilling, here's all the wonderful stuff, because I can assure you I've got it wrong a lot more times than I've got it right. I once did a tour with Right Said Fred in Bolton, and that was horrendous. A really good thing to set yourself, whatever career you're looking, from my experience, is to really focus on what your own concept of success is. And that's yours, nobody else's. And especially as musicians, your success is not defined by how many people you play to or the grade you get versus the grade someone else gets. I think relating success to happiness and enjoyment and the feeling of fulfillment is super important when we play instruments. And a problem with kind of academic music and grades is it puts points and scores and all these kind of things onto music making, which is the opposite of what music making is. Music making is about communication, having fun, challenging yourself, learning, developing. All these kind of things are a lot more important than I only got 14 out of 20 on my oral test. It doesn't matter. I've worked with a lot of the great kind of session musicians here and in America, and that does not matter. You are booking people. You want to be around positive people who you know can get the job done. And I think developing that kind of ability to communicate with people and connect with people is a lot more important than panicking about F sharp major not quite being in tune in the bottom octave. So that's a thought, and trying to separate the joy of music making from kind of the grade system of music making and I think John and Stu are really keen on. So that's an important thing. Surround yourself with the best people, throw yourself in the mix, make yourself the worst player in the band. It's a really useful thing to do. Go and, if you can, go and sit in with a band who are fantastic, or a band you really admire. Can you go and watch them rehearse? Bass players you might love. Can you go and watch them do a couple of gigs? This way of learning is how the music we all know and love was taught. It's an oral tradition. It's only recently gone into a kind of more academic framework, and you'll learn a lot more from listening and talking to people than you can in a more kind of formalized way, in my opinion. Another thing I've learned, which I think works musically and just in general, is putting yourself in a team where you don't feel like you have to be in charge or be the best, that kind of thing. You want to surround yourself with people who feel like they've got the space to grow and develop. And whether that's you playing in a jazz trio, whether that's you playing in a school band, whether that's you playing in a big band, trying to disconnect from that desire to, I have to be the best person in this scenario, switching that to, how can I contribute the most? How can I enjoy this music the most? And how can I musically and on a human level support my colleagues in whichever ensemble, is a really useful kind of, for me, mindset approach. And it makes music, it anchors music in fun and in communication and in community and all those kind of nice things that make us feel good, and not in, oh, I can't play these 2 bars because my semiquavers aren't quite right. I think if you can kind of move away from that, having said that, that only really works if you do the craft as well. You've got to put the hours in. One thing I know to be true about music is that you reap what you sow, in terms of the hard work is its own reward, especially when we're looking to develop from a kind of regional area we might play in. We might play in a few places in our own town and maybe some further towns close by. When you start looking on a kind of national scale, or you're thinking about music college, or you're thinking about going to a sixth form college and playing in different bands there's no harm ever comes from doing the work and doing the practice. It's kind of my experience with that. The last thing John wanted me to touch on before I shut up, because I can waffle on about this forever and I'm not sure how useful that is a memory I picked up in 2005 when we went to our first IAJE in Long Beach, was noticing the tenacity of American musicians. Like, they're serious. People are serious about this music. This music is, that we know and love, is as culturally relevant and important as Western classical music. There is no difference in kind of cultural wallop, if you like, between a Mahler symphony and some Ellington, and it should be given that level of focus and detail and commitment to the music to make it kind of sound right. And it was a nice full circle for me, because I remember sitting with John and Dave and watching Rob Glasper, and it was his first trio gig with Derek and Chris, who I've now been, some of my best mates working with for the last 8 or 9 years. So there's a nice kind of full circle there. So yeah, that's what I've been doing at the moment. What I try to do now, and especially in Guildhall, is look at helping musicians develop in a way that will set them up for a proper career. I think the old music college model, if perhaps music college is a thing some of you are considering, used to be one job will come up in the London Symphony Orchestra and all 50 of you will get that job. I think nowadays the focus is more on building kind of portfolio musicians. What can you do apart from playing your instrument? We'll get you to play your instrument to the highest possible level, but what is the rest of your skill set? What else do you care about? What else do you like musically? How else do you want to contribute to artistic endeavor, that kind of thing? So we can kind of tool people up to be able to hit the ground running and enjoy music making and make some money from it. We've failed our students in a way if they want to pursue a career in music, but then kind of life barriers and finance barriers and all that kind of stuff are put in the way. And it's easy for those dreams to diminish. So how can we kind of support people that way? So that's the kind of the gist of what I do. I don't own a trombone anymore, I'm afraid. I've got a lovely gold sprayed Rhodes, which are a bit of a disaster story. I took it to a local spray garage because I wanted it to look like Ray Charles's one from 1974. They very much blinged it. It looks more like Donald Trump's Rhodes now. But yeah, that's my kind of experience with music. I most certainly wouldn't have been where I am now if I'd not spent those kind of 5 or 6 years with John and Stu and George Hargan, or all those guys, and Max and Dave, and the who's who of the London music scene in their kind of late 20s to late 30s, a large percentage of them have come from this institution that you're in now. People I meet on sessions every day and work with in conservatoires and big gigs and that kind of stuff have all been in your shoes doing your thing. And I think that's a wonderful testament to this setup you guys are involved in, because it works. There is a constant lineage of people from Sheffield, Derby, Nottingham, and all those fabulous towns now having, big successful careers in music. So that's absolute testament to John. I can see there are some questions in there. Is it perhaps sensible, Stu, to have a look at those?
Yeah, if you want to. Yes, I don't know if the one from Ben's quite a nice one. So getting into music production, what's the best way to start?
The best way to start getting into music production is just to experiment. So some of the challenges with music production are there isn't a kind of set grade system. There isn't a kind of way to learn. Pick a DAW. So a DAW is the computer program that you'll use. Stands for a digital audio workstation. They're all the same. They're just different languages. There's not anything you can do in one and not the other. Pick the one that you like the look of, or maybe the one that you can get for free, or somewhere to start. Experiment and play. In the same way that when we're learning an instrument, perhaps we learn technique in that we learn our scales, but then we also interact with others and play. It's the exact same mindset. So you've got the technique, you need to know how it works, you need to be able to operate quickly, you need to be able to understand the kind of mechanical processes and figure out how you can be a really good engineer. But then you've also got to get the play side as well. How can you enjoy, how can you use these tools to make music with other people? They're just tools, just like your technique is. Technique in especially when we're talking about jazz music and people who enjoy improvising and people who just play great music, technique is just the keys to the door. It's just the bit that goes in between what's in your head and what's out there. And I think as an engineer as well, it's kind of similar. My ability on a big, with those enormous mixing desks in a studio, or if I'm editing in Pro Tools, is that's just the barrier between me and the music. So what do I need to do to make this happen, basically? So it's that same kind of thing. Pick a DAW, play around with it, grow in confidence, understand that the first few things you do might not sound the way you want to, and that's fine. The fun is in getting better, isn't it? I think, no one who plays golf goes out on their first ever day and goes, "This is incredible, I'm amazing." It's learning how to get better, I think, is the fun part.
Yeah, very cool. And what made you decide on Trinity at the time? Was that influence from Dennis, or?
A little bit, and I don't think I had the confidence to audition at the Royal Academy of Music. It felt a little bit too daunting to me. I didn't really know, if I'm totally honest, about this kind of conservatoire thing until 2 or 3 years before I auditioned. I didn't know that they had these kind of junior Saturday schools and all this kind of stuff. I remember George used to go down to Academy juniors every Saturday, and I had no concept of what he was doing, apart from every week he'd get better and better and better. If I'm totally honest, I picked Trinity because I think I was the only trombone player to audition on the jazz course that year, because it was in its infancy, and I'd already got the required AS levels, which was not that good for me, actually, because it didn't focus the mind as it should have done. But it was an amazing course, still is an amazing course. It's run by a guy called Hans Koller now. I think there's a little bit of differentiation between the music colleges now. I think Trinity is an amazing place to go if you want to be an artist. It will teach you how to collaborate. It will teach you how to develop your own artistic voice. So if you want to be the person on the front cover of the albums doing your own gigs, Trinity is a brilliant place to go. And I think the differential with our place, with Guildhall, is if you want to be that kind of all-rounder. Yeah. That's the point of difference with our place. But I think that's the main keys with that. Let's see if we got any others on there, or is that pretty much what are the facilities like at Guildhall, and what sets it apart from the other colleges? The facilities are great at Guildhall, both the kind of infrastructure facilities and the teaching staff. So we had a new complex we built in 2013, which is a gorgeous concert hall and recording studios and rehearsal rooms, all that kind of stuff. One of the best things about Guildhall is its physical location. So we are right smack bang in the middle of Zone 1. We are physically attached to the Barbican. So, and your halls of residence are 20 meters away from the Barbican. So you are in the thick of it. You can walk to Ronnie's in 15 minutes. You're in the mix. And a really important thing with music college, if you choose music college or if you go to university, I think that the course that you are in is half of the story. The rest is the scene in that city. And if you go to Birmingham, there's an incredible jazz scene, and it's getting involved and in the mix there and finding out who the amazing players are and getting involved with those people. Likewise in Manchester, I think wherever you go, the course is half the story, and kind of throwing yourself in the kind of the whole vibe of the place is the other half of the jigsaw. I think there's a question saying also, what are the best music scenes to go to and watch? The NYC's. Oh, perfect. Right. Well, there's an incredible scene in Southeast London at the moment, which is based around energy and fire and just performance. So you've got amazing bands, Ezra Collective, those guys, so they were all Trinity boys, absolutely brilliant. Wayne's band, which I can't for the life of me remember the name of right now, but there's 7 or 8 fantastic young people's music coming out in Southeast London. And a real positive of that is that it's really reshaping the jazz scene, and it's becoming a popular music again, like it used to be. So it's no longer, I think when I was at college, jazz in particular was almost kind of the music of the 65-year-olds. And now it's not. It's the music in the bars on Friday nights, and it's the gig that everyone wants to go to. Steamtown, that's the name of Wayne's band. But yeah, likewise, there's loads of stuff going on in Manchester. There's loads of stuff going on with Leeds. There's a lot of stuff happening everywhere. So it's just finding it and getting involved in it, I think, is a key thing.
Jules, just for me, as we start winding up, mate, this has just been fantastic. I've loved everything you've said, and I'm sure I'll send all the comments through from the kids, and little things, because some of them will be coming down to Guildhall to have a look around the open days.
Yeah.
Have you got a proudest moment? Have you got that moment where you thought, this is it, I'm just loving my life? I get what you say about success. It's not easy, it's not the grades, it's that.
I've had a couple of gigs where I've just gone at the start of the gig. So the really fun thing when you're an engineer is festival season is mega fun. So usually if I'm doing an arena show with a band, or I'm doing a big gig with whoever, we'll have a long drawn out sound check in the afternoon. And everything's safe, and you've got loads of time, and you're focused, and then you deliver. In a festival, I've got 45 minutes to get the previous superstar off stage, get my guys on stage, and it's got to work, and there's no safety net, there's no sound check, away you go. So the most alive I ever feel is the kind of 30 seconds. So if you have like a big, what's called a time code show, where there might be bits of playback and stuff, when you see the kind of countdown happening, you feel absolutely live. I've been fortunate to witness some remarkable musical moments. Some of the shows I did with Prince. I mean, we did a show at Ronnie's that was 3 hours long from 2 a.m. till 5 a.m., where the who's who of music were there. But the quality of the music was amazing. I was very fortunate enough to mix Ravi Shankar's last few shows, which he had a way of getting a kind of an energy to an audience that was quite special. So they were all kind of great moments. But I think my career has always been kind of facilitating other people to have that kind of performance experience. But some of my favorite gigs were, I used to play in a brass quartet, and we were all right. But I just have a right laugh doing that on a bandstand. It doesn't matter. It's this kind of idea that big stages and big audiences is a more gratifying or musically fulfilling thing than, that's why artists like doing small venues. People like doing small, intimate venues, because you're more alive in those situations. So I think there's all sorts. The other side of it is definitely had more howlers. I definitely had more moments where I thought, I'm seconds away from being fired, than I have thought, this is the one kind of thing.
Well, mate, it's been absolutely fantastic. And on behalf of everybody, thank you so much for giving up half an hour of your time tonight.
No worries. And if anyone's got any queries, or anyone wants to just write any questions, or particularly if you want to ask any questions about Guildhall, I can help you with that. I'll pop my email address on the group now, and I promise I'll write you back if you've got any queries.
And we'll try and swing by you sometime to say a quick hello, and maybe we'll bring some kids down for a tour.
Absolutely. Keep going, guys. The hard work is its own reward, isn't it? So
great. Thank you very much, everybody. I'll post this into the group chat so you've all got a copies, and big love to Julian for everything that you've done. Thank you very much, mate. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Jules.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.